What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, July 20th, 2018. I'm getting an echo. Okay, it's all fixed now. Anyway, it's Friday, July 20th, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's also the 49th anniversary of Apollo 11 landing on the moon and the 42nd anniversary of the Viking landers landing on Mars. Wow, am I really that old? I think so. For people who are living in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, you might want to keep an eye out the window. Apparently, there's really nasty tornadoes. There's a tornado season every year, but this one apparently is really bad. Something like 27 tornadoes yesterday. 5 of them touched down in populated areas, so just got to keep your eyes out. Keep the path clear to that storm cellar. Anyway, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to put you on the air with your comments and questions, so let's just get right on into it. I cannot believe the sound and fury, signifying nothing, that is still being emitted over Trump and Putin's summit. And we've really hit a situation where it doesn't matter what Trump does anymore. He's going to be attacked. He could save a little old lady in the middle of the street from being run down, and they'd still find something wrong with it. And as you know, yesterday it came on out that Trump is thinking about having a second summit in Washington, D.C., and inviting Putin to visit the city. And everybody went ballistic. Oh, it's horrible, it's horrible, it's horrible. And when you look at all the past presidents, secretaries of state who met with Putin, and it was no big deal, you know, but when Trump meets with Putin, they're treating it like it's the end of the world. So Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has issued a statement saying that Trump should not meet with Putin until Congress knows exactly what happened in that 2-hour closed-door meeting. So they're just ramping up the pressure on this thing. Back in 2001, Putin went all the way to Bush's Texas ranch. Had a barbecue, stayed overnight. Bush said he was thrilled Putin was there. Remember all the connections between the Clinton Foundation, the Kremlin? They were all buddy-buddy back then. Not today. All right, let's take a phone call. Francis in Montreal, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Yeah.
I called you yesterday and talked about that Spectator article on the nascent peace accord that will allow Assad to stay in power. And you had some doubts about the sources for that Spectator article. Well, today there's a Washington Post article, and it's by Josh Rogan. It's an opinion piece. It's inside the Putin-Netanyahu-Trump deal on Syria. And there's broad confusion both inside and outside the Trump administration about what agreements President Trump made with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the private meeting in Helsinki. One thing we do know is that post-summit, Trump now endorses a deal on Syria that Putin struck the week before with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. For the Trump-Putin private summit, Netanyahu called Trump to go through the agreement details, some of which I've reported before. Netanyahu finalized the terms with Putin during his visit to Moscow last week. Putin and Trump have both publicly talked about the agreement since Helsinki, albeit indirectly. But make no mistake, the agreement is real, and it's going to reshape how the powers of the Middle East act in southern Syria in the coming months and years. I won't read the whole thing, but it's Josh Rogan, inside the Putin-Netanyahu-Trump deal on Syria, Washington Post.
Okay. Well, these days the Washington...
So this is a big deal. Like, this is everything, all this distraction, with, like you were just talking about, all this nonsense and whooping cough Goldberg screaming in Jan Piro's face, F you, and stuff like that. This is all just a bunch of monkey business, and this is the real deal that came out. And the faction that wants the neocons like, the guys at Evening Standard guys and all that, William Crystal and all those bums. The bums who never did a day's work in their life, but they want to replace the American workers with Mexicans because Americans are too lazy. All those bums are having a meltdown right now because their beloved Middle Eastern wars and anarchy they were churning up is being shut down by Trump and Putin. And so it's a beautiful thing, and this is the real big story of the day, I think.
Well, it's a big story if indeed true, but again, we know the Washington Post is totally compromised by CIA. This is not the days when the Washington Post had the freedom and the courage to go up against Richard Nixon. The Washington Post is the voice of the deep state. And the reason I doubted your story yesterday when you called on in was you made the claim that all the surrendering jihadis were going to be herded into one part of Syria and then just simply bombed. And that would be a war crime. That would never be made public anywhere.
That was badly worded on my part.
Okay.
That was badly worded, I admit that. They're dumping a bunch of people in the northeast corner that are surrendering, and they're going to be sort of sequestered there. But the ones that remain in the southeast corner are going to have the hell bombed out of them.
Okay,
but this peace accord is real. They're saying
Francis,
this is coming out of administration sources.
Okay, there's only one problem with this story. Supposedly, this is a deal between Netanyahu, Putin, and Trump. Where is Assad on all of this? Because I'm sure that Netanyahu is making demands about things that are going on in Syria, like Iran must leave. He certainly, he wants Hezbollah to go back to Lebanon. And we know that Israel wants to make war on Lebanon somewhere down the road. I mean, they just uncorked on Gaza big time early today. So the problem with this deal, even if it's real,
I think this is part of the deal. This is part of the deal. This is what I was saying yesterday. There's a $50 billion oil and gas deal from Russia for Iran to bribe them into withdrawing. And Hezbollah is going back to southern Lebanon. And basically with Putin there sitting in Syria, that's the guarantee. And Israel's going to be left alone. But they're going to have to give up like Eretz Israel delusions.
Oh, they'll never do that. They will never, ever do that. All right, well, listen, if it turns out to be true, fine. But I got to tell you, my gut is telling me we're missing something here. And but you're absolutely right. If peace breaks out in the Middle East, or if the Cold War really does come to an end, all of the American politicians whose stock portfolios are invested in the armaments industry, they're going to be totally freaking out. They love war. War makes them rich, makes them richer. And we're already seeing the war hawks are just in this hysterical frenzy, bordering on madness, that this new war fever that they've spent all these years whipping up may actually be coming to an end.
Well, yeah, that's it. Well, we'll see.
Well, we'll see.
Good talking to you, Mike. Have a good day.
Time will solve that mystery. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So, article coming out of Daily Caller here saying Trump has been set up, framed, and relentlessly persecuted by the American intelligence community. Yes, that's absolutely true. And even in this article, they're talking about the frenzied furor and outrage over Trump's reluctance to express blind trust for the intelligence community defies reason and reality. Well, not really. There's a reason for it. The politicians rely on the intelligence community as the bedrock of their propaganda. Whenever they go to the newspaper with a story saying that Putin is tap dancing barefoot on shag carpeting, they'll say, an unnamed intelligence source reveals. Well, if the American people stop trusting the intelligence agencies, that's pretty much the end of the government's credibility, because nobody trusts the politicians anymore. Nobody's trusting the corporate media. The intelligence agencies were the last bastion of some kind of institutional ethics within the federal government, and now that's being destroyed. And that's why they're going wacko. They're losing the war for the minds of the American people, and they're hitting the panic button here. So leftists worship power, and they are unraveling without it. They can't control Donald Trump. That is driving them absolutely bonkers. They have no policies that work. They have no platform that is appealing to voters. For every one illegal immigrant they sneak in and register to vote, they're losing 2 real American voters over to the GOP. The donations, small mom and pop donations to the GOP are just piling on up. The Democrats basically self-destructed trying to force Hillary on us back in 2016 here. So another article, this one came out of Zero Hedge, talking about the establishment strikes back, shades of Star Wars, basically going on into that recent indictment of 12 named alleged Russian military intelligence GRU officers by Rod Rosenstein. And the context, of course, was the timing. It came on out at a time when it could possibly inflict damage on the Trump-Putin summit. It turned out not to do it because probably Putin and Trump are just as sick of hearing about all of this Russian nonsense as the American people are, according to Gallup. The American people have just tuned out on all this Russian nonsense. So this indictment is 30 pages long, and it's full of all these painstaking details about alleged Russian involvement, but you have to take it all on faith. There is no evidence provided to back up the claims, and the claims themselves could easily be false trails set up by any number of hostile intelligence services to implicate Moscow, or our own intelligence services to implicate Moscow. From an intelligence officer's point of view, there are even some significant areas where operational implausibility undermines the case being made. It's a bluff. It's another piece of USDA choice bovine excrement. Story coming out of Information Clearinghouse, the coming coup to overthrow President Trump, sedition at the highest levels. And they go right to the heart of the matter. The annual budget of the military security complex is $1 trillion, drawn from the pockets of you, the American taxpayer, who, despite sending all that money to the government, still have a lot of things you need that you're not getting, like functional roads, bridges that don't collapse, so forth and so on. Now, in order to justify such a major amount of money going into the military-industrial complex or the military security complex, they got to have an enemy. They got to have an enemy. And they picked out Russia, and they've been working for years to turn Russia into this enemy that you would all be afraid of, so you would just voluntarily surrender all of your wealth and the lives of your children without any complaint. Except, of course, according to Gallup, it didn't work. It didn't work. The American people are far more concerned with the immigration issues than with Russia. In fact, Americans who said Russia was the most important thing on their mind, less than 1% of those surveyed by Gallup here. And once again, according to Fox News, the Democrats are now talking impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. And I think that's probably a reaction to the declining poll numbers heading into the midterms, that the Democrats are starting to realize they are not, in fact, going to recapture either house of the Congress. So they may be pushing for an impeachment now and counting on being able to get some rhinos to switch on over. But again, if there's anybody here listening from the Secret Service or monitoring this show for the people at the White House, this feels so much like the run-up to Dealey Plaza, November 22nd, 1963. Kennedy is standing his ground. He's standing his ground on Putin. He's starting to finally be his own man. He's apparently, if this Washington Post article is accurate, he's talking about winding down Syria. They're already talking about getting out of Afghanistan. He's making friends with Russia, which Kennedy was trying to do. I am very, very worried that there is a risk, and I hope Trump is wearing his Kevlar undies. That's all I can say. Now, turning over to domestic politics here, Special Counsel Robert Mueller has reportedly given Tony Podesta immunity to testify against Paul Manafort. Now, this is coming out of Tucker Carlson. last night on Fox News. And Robert Mueller has offered immunity to Tony Podesta, who's founder of the Podesta Group and the brother of former Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. And the issue here, of course, is that everything they have against Manafort is totally outside the scope of this investigation into Russian collusion, which is what Robert Mueller is supposed to be looking at. What Robert Mueller is trying to do right now is find somebody that he can get into a legal jam, and then he can, like, you know, nudge him in the ribs and say, hey, if you'll say this bad stuff about Donald Trump, I'll get you a wrist slap punishment. You'll walk out of here a free man. I think that's what's going on. But again, the decline in civility, and now, sadly, we're starting to see it on the conservative side as well, as we reported yesterday. It's impossible to have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, you cannot come together to a position of unity. We're in a very dangerous tracks. And we're going to talk about this more in hour number 3, because Claire has some cogent comments that she wants to make about this. It is a very, very troubling time. Now, Maxine Waters had a demonstration outside her Los Angeles office yesterday to counter an anticipated protest by the Oath Keepers organization. And before they ran the demonstration, Maxine Waters was out there saying, oh, I'm afraid there's going to be violence. There's going to be violence when these Oath Keepers show up, and we're afraid, but we're going to stand our ground. And you should see the pictures. Maxine Waters supporters, if you will, rocks, sticks, baseball bats, who knows what else they had there, burning the United States flag. And I understand the Supreme Court has ruled that burning the flag is covered by the First Amendment. But here's the interesting part. The Oath Keepers never showed up. They issued a statement saying that based on the rhetoric coming out of Maxine Waters and her supporters, they didn't think they could avoid violence with a counter-protest, and so they decided simply not to show up. So in other words, Maxine Waters, who's out there whining and screaming about possible violence, used the threat of violence to get her opponents to stay home. I find it so hard to understand how this person keeps getting reelected and reelected and reelected. And I don't know, election fraud maybe. Okay, now, here's a new little piece of information that will start to make things a little bit clearer. We have been talking for a long time about why there doesn't seem to be an investigation of the Clinton Foundation. Well, as it turns out, there actually is one over at the FBI somewhere. But this investigation is under the control of Melissa Hodgman Strzok. And she's been blocking this FBI probe of the Clinton Foundation for 21 months. And yes, if you think you recognize the last name, this is Peter Strzok's wife. So that's why the investigation is not moving forward. Once again, they're protecting this gigantic scandal of corruption that could bring down the entire government if it got out. They're circling the wagons. You can smell the fear coming out of the Beltway. They're absolutely, absolutely scared that somebody's going to talk, somebody's going to go public in a way that can't be covered up by the corporate media. We got to take a break for commercials. Oh, we got a caller waiting on the line. We'll get to that after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And for those of you wishing to help out Republic Broadcasting, and we do need your help, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer, anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call in with a debit or credit card donation or to pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours and extension 3 at all other times. Now, before we go to the caller who's waiting on the line, and I'm probably going to have to take him to the next commercial break. Over this last commercial break, Fox News was interviewing Leon Panetta, who's sitting there saying that, we have a right to know what Putin and Trump talked about in that room. And of course, you have Chuck Schumer who's out there saying there shouldn't be a second meeting until Congress knows what was said in that room. And this is the primary reason why I'm hesitating on this story that appeared first in The Spectator and now is in the Washington Compost, which seems to be operating on the basis of information that they have from inside these private meetings, because the meeting between Netanyahu and Putin was behind closed door, so was the meeting between Putin and Trump. They can't have that detailed information. Or if they do, why do we have Leon Panetta and Chuck Schumer out there screaming that they don't have that information? So something is a little bit wonky here. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Trump should just come out and say they're played a game of Uno. Something like that.
No, they talked about your children.
Yeah, yeah. That's like Loretta Lynch and all them.
Yeah,
oh man,
that was the reference.
Yeah, you know why Maxine Waters keeps getting elected? Because her constituents are garbage, just like she is. I mean, there's an ignorance in this country, Mike. Not with there's people who are waking up, but there's just still an ignorance of, they don't understand like who these people are. I mean, they burn the American flag. I mean, it's not the country's fault or the flag's fault. It's bad leadership and a stupid percentage of stupid population of people. You know what I mean? Like it's not the flag's fault. It's being used as a weapon now. Yeah. It's a joke. I mean, and Mike, it is coming down to they bring a knife, you bring a gun. You send one. They send one of yours to the hospital. You send one of those to the morgue.
Well, I mean, I really
coming down to that, Mike,
I do not want to see that happen here. But the reality is that over the decades, over the centuries, leaders have worked on being able to manipulate ordinary people, and they brought it to a very, very fine art. And I mean, there are, people with psychology degrees where this is all they work on. They're hired to basically work. How do we make the propaganda more effective? How do we manufacture consent? How do we motivate people in the direction we want them to go when they don't want to go there? And there's actually a lot of money being spent on that kind of research. But people, the fastest way to undo it all, of course, is for people to understand they are being propagandized. They are being lied to. Propaganda only works on a population that's not aware they're being propagandized.
But the thing about propaganda, it burns itself out when there's too much of it, because then people don't believe it after a while. I mean, look at the latest poll. Nobody cares. Yep. Because you know what I mean? It's burning itself out. And hey, Mike, what's the Democrats going to do when the 2018 elections come up and they lose big, or in 2020, if Hillary does run again, which I doubt she's gonna, what happens if they lose again? Are they going to say, well, the Russians are at it again, or are they going to blame China?
Oh, they're already getting ready to scream that Russia's meddling with the 2018 election to keep the Democrats from taking the Congress. They can't accept their own failures. They can't accept the fact that they don't have a platform that's resonating with voters. They can't accept the fact that their antics and hysterics over the last year and a half have turned off mainstream America, along with all this politically correct nonsense about, which restroom you got to use. Most people are just disgusted with all of that. And so, yeah, I think they're going to lose. Absent massive election fraud, the Democrats are actually going to lose seats in the 2018 midterm elections, and they're going to turn around and scream, it was Russia all over again.
Yeah, Mike, speaking of all this political correctness, what about in Massachusetts where they're going to let the kids decide what gender they want to be. I mean, these people are, that's child abuse, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I mean, you got to draw the line. These people are insane.
They really are, and it's, you know, it really is absurd. I mean, your gender is determined by your DNA. If you want to know what gender you are, look in a mirror after you get out of the shower. And this idea of gender fluidity, I don't see what it is these people are trying to accomplish. I don't see where they're trying to go with it. All I know is, having failed to convince the adults of this agenda, now they're targeting the schools. And I'm still trying to figure out
can you hold me
to what end. Yeah, I'm going to hold you over. Stay on the line. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and we're talking about how political correctness has just gone totally wacko, and they've lost the plot line. And I think this is why ordinary mainstream Americans are just turning away from the Democratic Party, which they're demonstrating not just with the poll numbers, but with their political contributions. But this whole gender fluidity issue, the only thing that I can see it's designed to do is basically undermine our sense of self, our sense of identity, in order to make it easier to control us. Because the whole premise is ridiculous. I can't wish myself to be female any more than I can wish myself to be young, or for that matter, rich. It doesn't work that way. Nature is nature. And I understand that the LGBTQ plus movement wanted acceptance, and they're being accepted. But they've now walked across this line where they're now getting very militant and aggressive and in your face with it. That's turning people off. And back in the 1990s, the feminist movement they made exactly the same mistake. And there's a very good book that chronicles that, called Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Sommers, who is herself a feminist. And she laid out how the original model of feminism was equal pay for equal work, equal access to credit, equal access to education, things we could all get on board with, and I was a supporter. And then all of a sudden, it got militant and in your face, and all men are rapists, and, you know, we've got to sue male-only health clubs out of existence for discrimination, but female-only health clubs have to be protected because we have a right from the prying eyes of those men. And at that point, people just turned away from it, including yours truly. And now we're seeing that same mistake being made all over again. I think we need to, all of us, need to go back to the philosophy of, you know, live and let live. Whereas Rodney King said, can't we all just get along? Why are we being driven to be so confrontational with each other over relatively minor, trivial things? And unfortunately, a lot of it is...
Do you realize these kids... Sorry.
I was going to say, a lot of it's coming from our leadership, like Maxine Waters and Loretta Lynch and all these other so-called leaders who are openly calling for violence in the streets.
And like these kids, I mean, they got gender-neutral clothes. They shaved the girl's head, like not head off, but, you know, they cut her hair short to look like a boy. And her brothers, they all both got gender-neutral clothes, right? Then they go to school. And, Mike, I'm sorry, but these kids are going to be probably on some kind of Prozac or something, and they're probably going to be the next school shooters, you know, because they're going to get picked on. Even if it's like a politically correct school, which they all are now, they're still going to be looked down upon, you know, and they're advertising it, you know, and it's a shame. You know, it's a shame, like, if you're born a boy, you're born a boy. If you're born a girl, it's not a very complicated issue. These people muddy up the waters on purpose, like you said. And, Mike, did you see that story about who wrote the Jungle Book? They painted over at the university, they painted over the poems
Yes.
of, Rich Kipling?
Yes.
He's a racist. Mike, they take the books, they'll burn the books, and then they'll take you. They don't want no stat. They want to replace everything with what they think is, you know, their version of what they like.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, I would tell people don't go along with it because, you know, you'll be going to the killing fields eventually, you know. I mean, because that's what these people hate you. They hate the culture. They just hate everything this country stands for, and the Western world in general, because it's happening also in Europe and France and Germany, and it's a major thing going on.
Well, they're driven by this. They're driven by this utopian vision of they can engineer a better world in which humans are free from emotional strife. And this goes all the way back to Margaret Mead and Coming of Age in Samoa, which was an intellectual fraud, which is why every time the liberals try this, it crashes and burns. But they keep on doing it because they will never admit that the foundation of the liberal philosophy is flawed that badly. Girls will be girls, boys will be boys. And I understand that there is homosexuality, which, in my opinion, is genetically mediated. No, you do not choose to be gay, and so it's in your DNA, and you can't wish it to be any other way. And which is why all of this gay conversion therapy, I think, is a load of nonsense. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
And Mike, real quick, I just want to say, if anybody needs to go on YouTube, type in The Duran. There's a great video interview with Peter Lavelle again. He's been on there a few times, and it's the best video you guys are going to watch. It's only about 25 to 30 minutes long. It explains a lot of stuff, but also Jimmy Dore, which he's a progressive, he had a thing, Mike, I think you should watch something that's called China a Threat. And, it's comical, but there was a meeting in Aspen, and they had the new FBI director there, or whoever it was, and who hosted it? Lester Holt,
Yep.
But need to watch that video too, Mike, because he has some footage in there of the FBI agent saying, basically, FBI agent said it's like economics. That's why China's a threat. It's all about the money. It's all about economics, man.
Right. That's exactly right. I've been saying for months now, the ultimate goal of the United States is to drag the world back to Bretton Woods, where all cross-border transactions have to use that U.S. dollar, for which the U.S. charges a small fee. And China, of course, is now part of BRICS. They're moving away from the dollar. So is Russia. And that's really what's driving the agenda. And the reason there's so much panic to declare Russia and China enemies and get into a dust-up with them is because we're nearing the point where the avoidance of the U.S. dollar internationally is really going to start having an impact. And it's one of the reasons why I said, while I understand Trump's purpose with the tariffs, I think his timing was a little poor.
And isn't it funny, all of our great leadership, Russia this, Russia... Hey, man, keep saying that. They're just moving closer to the freaking Chinese, which ain't a problem with me because, I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, the BRICS, they just had the Shanghai co-op meeting a couple days before Putin met Trump, and everything's moving along. If you go on YouTube, see all the projects China's doing all over the world, Africa, this or that. They're building bridges, we blowing them up.
Yeah,
because we're a welfare and a warfare state now. That's all we got left. We're a warfare state.
We're a failing empire. We're a failing empire.
Yep.
And
all right, thanks, Mike.
Right, you got it. Yeah, we're a failing empire, and the government is looking for somebody to blame it on. So gosh darn Ruskies, it's those gosh darn Chinese. We didn't do anything wrong. Don't blame us. It was those other people over there. Go hate them. All right, the phone lines are open again. We're going to get back to the news here. Now, basically, there is a rumor started by Margarita Simonian saying that Julian Assange will be handed over to Great Britain by the Ecuadorian officials in the coming days. And this is ominous because this lady has very good sources, high-level people in Russia, and she apparently works at Russia Today. So it may actually be happening now. And boy, they will want to make an example of him. Now, Hollywood, as you know, has usually worked as the propaganda arm of the U.S. government, and they're doing it again. Actually, not just Hollywood, the film industry as a whole, because they've already decided the next James Bond movie will have a Russian villain. It's time we have the Russians back on in. I think the last time they had a Russian villain was The World Is Not Enough. And he was kind of an outsider, a loner. He wasn't institutionally part of the Russian government. Okay. All right. Now, over in the war zones, things are going very, very good for Assad. And the terrorists have agreed to surrender the entire Quneitra area to the Syrian army. And based on the agreement they've had, they've reached an agreement that will grant amnesty to those who surrender and allow others to leave for Idlib. And apparently Russia mediated this agreement, so that went very well. Now, Syria's Assad is set to recover the Golan frontier because of this surrender deal. Now, this, of course, will bring Syria back up to that buffer zone with Israel. Israel will get very nervous about that. But they are keeping the Iranian advisors in the north, so that doesn't contribute to the tension over there. There's a lot of tension in the region here. Meanwhile, Canada, the United States, and Britain are putting together an operation to rescue the white helmets down at the Golan. And nobody knows where they'll go, but they're probably going to be paid very well for their services to the propaganda war and for faking all those chemical weapons attacks that were blamed on Assad here. Meanwhile, of course, we're still seeing the U.S. government making stink face at Iran, and U.S. forces and Iranian forces inside Syria are sort of doing this little battlefield dance that has a lot of people very worried that there might be destabilization. All right, here we go. And we knew this was coming. Israel telegraphed this. There has been a massive attack into Gaza by Israel. Israel is blaming it on the fact that this time, when Israeli snipers started shooting at the protesters along that fence, somebody shot back at them. And so Israel basically opened up and sent in the jet planes, and they're really pounding on the place. Other reports coming out of the Middle Eastern media saying at least one IDF soldier was also killed in the melee. But it's a very small place if you think about it. It's about, I think, twice the size of the city of Chicago. That's how big Gaza is. So they go on in, and they're just bombing those poor people. And it's amazing that, you know, all these liberal protesters in this country who scream about the poor children down at the border with Mexico, you never hear a peep out of them about the poor children in Gaza. You never hear a peep out of them about the poor children in Yemen or Syria or Afghanistan or Libya. It's very, very disgusting. Okay, as you know, there is a new Gaza flotilla underway, and apparently there are 4 ships, and they're on the last 1,000 miles getting to Gaza. Bad time to show up with, obviously, the attack going on. The delegate from the United States in the Gaza flotilla is Joe Meadors, who is a survivor of the 1967 Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. And he basically joined the flotilla at Corsica for that final leg of the flight. We've had him here on the show. Meadors was a signalman on the bridge of the USS Liberty and was attacked by Israel, who tried to sink it and wanted to blame it on Egypt. Israel killed 34 U.S. sailors and wounded 174 crew members, and it was all hushed up by Admiral John McCain, father to Senator John McCain. It was just an accident, really. It was just, you know, the Israelis thought they were hitting an Egyptian horse carrier because Of course, we all know horse carriers have giant dish antennas all over them. So Joe's presence on the flotilla is going to be a little bit of salt in the wounds, and I hope he's going to be okay. And as I said, right now with Israel uncorking a major military operation into Gaza, the timing could not be worse, and I hope they're going to be okay. Now, Iran's foreign minister has responded to repeated propaganda about how Iran is destabilizing the Middle East and Iran is doing this and Iran is doing that, by pointing out that it is, in fact, the United States that's destabilizing the world through massive arms exports, and that these excessive arms sales are undermining global peace. And they're right. And it's sort of weird to see the U.S. government just out there trying to sell so many weapons to other countries, lethal weapons, military weapons. At the same time, they want to take them away from us ordinary law-abiding citizens. But it's big business. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Mitchell in Memphis, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's going on? We spoke, I think, Wednesday, 2 days ago?
Yep.
Listen, I'm trying to get an answer from you because I'm not sure about something. The two of us have decided that the government has violated the rules and restrictions and so on and so forth. They've violated the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
They violated the Constitution. They violated the social contract.
Yep.
Looking backwards, as far as the eye can see, you can cite examples, and you have, and I can cite examples. Well, Sandra Spooner talks about it all the way up to present day, you know, from Katrina, levees, Flint. The government's failing. And you said that when the government violates these things, that it delegitimizes itself. And in your closing comment when I called you Wednesday, you said the government has outgrown its lawful authority a long, long time ago. So my position now, and my question is, I think the two of us understand, as we speak today, right here, right now on the phone in 2018, does the government have any authority on the collective body known as we the people? Because if I understand you correctly, you say it does not have any authority.
It has delegitimized itself. Of course, there's a practical consideration. You know, they've got the police force and they've got, you know, guns and, you know, they're ruling us by force of arms, not with consent of the governed, as was set forth in the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, so my concern is that the three bodies of government, or the legislative, judicial, and what's that, executive branch, are under the heading of the government. So this would be, if the government is delegitimized, then so too would the three branches of government.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here, because they're the ones who've been violating the Bill of Rights. Anyway, Mitchell, got to let you go. Got to take a break.
Is the president legitimate?
If the government is either legitimate or not. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones to Janice in Florida. Aloha, Janice. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'm wondering what's happening with the men from the USS Liberty. Last time I think they were on your show, they were talking about producing a documentary, and I'm wondering if there's any progress that's been made on that.
Well, it's slow going because they're obviously having a hard time raising the kind of funding it takes to produce a feature film. And equally obvious, there's a lot of pressure on money people to not support the project. Coming from Israel. Israel wants this story to go away. I mean, over in Israel, they're now passing laws where the government can simply erase certain history. I mean, it's right out of Orwell. And they want to do the same thing here. They want certain exceptions to freedom of speech, the Israel exception, to silence criticism of Israel and to basically say talking about anything Israel has done is not protected speech under the First Amendment. I mean, that's how desperate they are.
Well, that's Israeli pressure on financiers of a feature film or a documentary. But I'm wondering on another comment you made that everybody is shedding crocodile tears for the kids on the southern border in the U.S., but No one says anything about the children of Gaza. Why do you think the rest of the world is silent on what is happening? I mean, it's there for all of us to see. Why are governments silent? Why do they receive Netanyahu as though he is some kind of credible, moral human being and not a monster in a human body? I'm just wondering, I know you can't speak for other people, but you're obviously very observant. What are your perceptions?
I think it would be silly to assume that the United States of America is the only country in which Israel has worked to compromise the government and the media. The proof of that is that, for the most part, especially in the West, the media in all of the Western countries turns a blind eye to what's going on down in Israel. Now, obviously, for the Bloody Monday massacre, they couldn't do that because it was top news all over the independent media, and they couldn't afford to be seen not to report it. But they tried to downplay it. In the case of the New York Times, they tried to make it look like it was all the Gazans' fault. You know, how dare they protest being starved to death in a giant open-air prison? Don't they understand this is how the universe is supposed to work? Yeah, Israel's influence behind the scenes in many, many, many countries. But as far as not crying for the children of Yemen or Libya or Syria, they're irrelevant. The liberals are only going to cry about children who are useful to their agenda. And right now, dead children, displaced children in other countries don't fit in with any of their agendas.
Do you think Israel has the power, or it has the nefarious ability to do so secretly, but has Israel already made it clear that any country's leadership that speaks up will be endangered, their children will be endangered, or other interest leaders who condemn Israel?
Could very well be. Could very well be. Anyway, Janice, we got to let you go here. Take a break for station identification. We'll be right back with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the issues of war and military, there was a rather interesting article that came out from Russia Insider saying Trump is right. NATO is obsolete. And if Europe wants to fight imaginary enemies, it should pay its own way. Now, here is the problem with that. NATO, for the most part, does buy their weapons from the United States of America using money they get from the United States taxpayer. If they're all of a sudden told they have to pay their own way, they're going to cut their military expenditures, and that means a loss of profits for the American military industrial complex. They will never, ever let that happen. They want more wars. They want more tension. It's all about boosting the profits here. Now, interestingly enough, on Russia Today yesterday, RPI Executive Director Daniel McAdams wonders if maybe President Obama spoke a bit too freely in his recent CNN interview, where the president told CNN that the U.S. government had, in fact, brokered a deal to transition power in Ukraine. In other words, it's an admission that the U.S. was behind the coup d'etat against Yanukovych and putting in of Poroshenko. And of course, it undermines the official story, which was that the uprising against Yanukovych was a popular grassroots movement. We had nothing to do with that, really. Now, Russia's ambassador to the United States is saying that Trump and Putin discussed allowing a referendum to take place in eastern Ukraine. In other words, exactly what Crimea did. And under the United Nations rules, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's nothing that says they can't. So having a formal referendum and declaring their independence, of course, Kiev will probably react very badly to it. Ever since Poroshenko's come on in, Ukraine's like leprosy. Bits and pieces of it keep falling off. He's not going to like that at all. Turning to the economic news, Russia is continuing to liquidate their U.S. Treasury holdings In fact, they're no longer seen as a major player in the T-bill market. Russia is also starting to wean its economy off the US dollar as Washington ratchets up sanctions. They're going to go through these new competing parallel systems that have been set up. If they're not going through the dollar, the sanctions are not enforceable. And Trump is already out there basically trying to browbeat the rest of the world, saying, you do what we tell you to do. You don't do business with that country over there, or we'll sanction you. Kind of reminds me of Oprah Winfrey. You know, you get a sanction, and you get a sanction, and you get a sanction, and you get a... It's insane. It's just it's driving the rest of the world away from us. It's isolating us economically and politically. And as if things were not bad enough, Donald Trump has announced he's ready to put tariffs on all Chinese goods imported into the U.S. That's about $500 billion in commerce. Now, we've been talking about Tesla. They're having a lot of problems. And Tesla has announced that they have met their production goal. They're able to turn out the Model 3s as fast as was promised originally. So they've met that goal, and the investors are a little bit happier about that. But there is a problem. Some sharp-eyed people spotted that over in Lathrop, California, there are thousands of Teslas sitting in a field. And people have been watching it, and Teslas are being taken in and dropped off. Very few are coming on out. And the issue right now is Tesla appears to be trying to sort of downplay the fact that requests for refunds are coming in faster than new deposits on new car sales. A big part of it, of course, is after the long delay in getting the car out there. A lot of the tax incentives to have an electric car are being rescinded. They're about to expire. If you don't actually get the car, you don't get the tax credit. The tax credit was very, very generous. I think it was about $2,500. And I got to be very, very honest, knowing how rushed they were to get those cars done, I wouldn't want to drive one. Not until somebody else has been in the cars for a while and we get to see what its safety record is like. Those first cars, Tesla 1's, beautiful. These are a rush job. There's no other way to put it. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we have seen lately so many car companies get caught taking shortcuts, just trying to rush the numbers, get the cars out there. But the bizarre thing is, as this field in Lathrop is showing, they're not able to move the product. Down here at the bottom of the hill, we have this big open piece of land. It used to be a 4-screen outdoor movie theater. And then the screens were taken down and it was being used for a weekend flea market. Now it's completely closed off. It's an overflow lot for the local car dealers. They can't move the inventory. And I think the same thing is hitting Tesla. And if they can't sell those cars, I mean, I know they've got something like 400,000 pre-orders. Except, again, requests for refunds are coming on in. But past that, if they can't sell the cars, they could be in serious, serious trouble. And Elon Musk is starting to show the strain. And he's trying to distract from this embarrassing situation with the British diver and the pedo comment by publishing his environment efforts. He's doing all these good things out there. And basically, Elon Musk's comments have actually caused a 3% drop in the Tesla stock. and the company's investors are demanding an apology and that Tesla clean up his act, because his antics, as much as the inability to get the production line for the Tesla 3, are costing them money. And boy, if there's one thing that investors really hate, it's losing money here. Okay, so let's talk about immigration here, because that is still a hot button issue. And the latest move coming out of ICE, rather out of the Liberals, is the complete abolishment of the immigration customs enforcement. Really, just open up the borders. It's going to be fine. It would be wonderful. Well, somebody did an analysis. Actually, it was over at Breitbart News. And it says if the ICE had been eliminated 5 years ago and the borders totally opened up, there would be about 1,400,000 criminal illegal aliens released into the public. They're talking about triple the population of Miami. Hardened criminals just thrown into the American population. That's the blessings of open borders. There's got to be some vetting here. Now, ICE has arrested 37 illegal aliens in Middlesex, New Jersey, who were released by the local jail after they ignored detainer requests. These are all Title VIII violations, by the way. Now, Trump came on out talking about this and said he cannot name a single country that's been improved by mass migration or large flows of refugees. And he said this on Tucker Carlson, and he warned European leaders while overseas the dangers of mass migration and the cost it will have on the European citizens and each country's culture. And he's absolutely right. And I'm sure those European leaders who are not on the dole from the globalist agenda realize the damage. We're starting to see populist leaders get elected all over Europe who are standing up and saying, this is nuts, it's got to stop. Even in the heyday of American immigration, with the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, it caused problems. The gangs of New York, there were constant clashes going on between these different ethnic groups. There were open gang warfare. Now, the Dutch foreign minister, Stef Blok, basically came out in a private meeting saying that peaceful, multicultural societies don't exist. So it's all the illusion, this utopian vision of a multicultural world where we all stand around and hug each other and sing Kumbaya. It didn't work. Why? Because the basic foundation of the liberal political philosophy is based on a lie. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Rick in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, all the best. I go to you when I need the absolute truth. There's a guy by the name of Bill Browder who has all the Republicans and all the Democrats on his side, and he's paying millions of dollars a minute to get on Fox News with his own talking points. What's the real deal? What is this guy doing?
Okay, well, Bill Browder is a British citizen, and during the press conference following their private closed-door meeting where Putin and Trump came on out, Putin dropped a major bombshell, and it was that Bill Browder, while he had been in Russia, basically built up $1.5 billion in cash on which no taxes were paid, and then somehow the money was gotten out of Russia without being detected, and that after that, $400 million went to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And by the way, it has been clarified as being $400 million. Whoever came on out and said it was a translation problem was probably just trying to downplay it, hoping that we'll say, oh, it's only 400,000, no big deal. It's a big deal even if it's $1. But it's $400 million as of the last report, and it's illegal. It's absolutely illegal. And Hillary Clinton does not want this story to be out there, and so she's calling in all the chips. Because if sources are to be believed, everybody inside that beltway is dirty from that Clinton Foundation. It was a giant slush fund, and they were all dipping in. And they don't want that to come on out. It really would bring down this entire government. So they're turning this Browder into a victim. Oh, he's being abused. And no, he's a criminal. He's a criminal, and he's corrupt, and he made an illegal campaign donation to Hillary Clinton.
And I can tell, because of you and people that with your skills, I can tell that he is paying Fox News to be on air, and he is submitting the talking points. And the news anchor is regurgitating the talking points and creating the conversation that this guy's paying for. So I know this guy's a really, really bad guy, and he's got a lot of money.
Well, he supposedly still has, $1 billion stashed somewhere. Okay?
Yep, thank you so much. And now, I knew something was up with that. They're trying to make Putin look out to be the bad guy. And,
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And
I hope Putin gets proactive and gets on there to counteract this paid-for media that this Bill Browder guy is paying for. Because I have a feeling this guy is one of the top puppet masters of what I guess we refer to as the deep state, but I don't know. But I appreciate your advice.
He could very well be. I don't think Putin is really going to waste a lot of time trying to communicate with the American public. He knows the corporate media is against him. He wants to avoid more allegations of interference in our internal affairs. I think he's just going to sit back and watch as the corporate media discredits itself and the U.S. government falls apart, because that's clearly what's happening. We don't have to worry about Russia or China trying to destroy our country. It's destroying itself.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your insight.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, a leading member of the Belgian right-wing party, Vlaams Belang, said that Europe could be close to a civil war. And he's saying lynching, violence, and vandalism, the urban guerrilla is portentous, and was basically reacting to the French World Cup riots. He says governments are losing control. And in his tweet, he added footage of a white man being ambushed by several migrants. Yeah, governments are losing control. They angered their own indigenous people with the open borders policy, and then they brought in a new population of refugees who weren't going to listen to the government anyway. What did they think was going to happen? Alrighty. Now, the House Democrats came on out with this idea for a bill to abolish ICE. And they were going to just grandstand with it. We're pushing this legislation and we're being blocked. And the GOP basically turned it around on them and moved it to a fast floor vote, where they could basically say, all right, these Democrats voted for this measure. Because, again, according to the Gallup polls, right now the immigration issue is what's uppermost on the majority of Americans' mind. And so in this floor vote, 167 Democrats abstained or voted against their own resolution. So they got hoisted with their own petard well and truly on that one here. So getting back to that Gallup poll, what is really interesting is not that the majority of Americans think immigration is the problem, but that the number is going up rapidly. It's becoming the key issue going into the midterm elections. And I think that's another reason why the Democrats are panicking. Because, again, for every one illegal immigrant they sneak on in and register to vote, they're losing two mainstream middle Americans. So getting on back to Mad Maxine, who's out there basically inciting political violence, it has had the inevitable result Today in South Dakota, police executed a burglary search warrant and found multiple guns and bomb-making material, including ammonium nitrate and aluminum powder, within a residence of an Antifa member. And those who have followed the violent left will note that robbery and burglary are the primary finance mechanisms for political violence. Well, you got your wish, Maxine. There you go. Over in Great Britain, you're going to love this one. As you know, there have been a lot of scandals coming on out lately about expenses scandals or sexual harassment scandals with members of parliament. So members of parliament voted to grant themselves anonymity if accused of expenses fraud, sexual harassment, or anything else they don't want you to know. And they voted through this bill, and the list of politicians under investigation vanished from the Parliament's website. One of the ones that disappeared was of Labour's Keith Vaz, who's accused of bringing the House of Commons into disrepute by buying cocaine for male escorts. But you don't get to learn that anymore. You don't get to see what your elected officials are really like. Just look at the advertising. The political slogans, and those things. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know what these people are really like. Just watch the ads and you will be happy. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And interesting little article out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. And a lot of people have suspected this for a long time, just watching his few public appearances. Apparently, the president of the European Union, Jean-Claude Juncker, has an alcohol problem. And basically, his aide is actually running the show. And apparently, Jean-Claude Juncker binges on gin. And apparently, it's a big stink. But we've seen videos of him walking onto a stage where it's obvious he's staggering. Now, interestingly enough, Mexico's next government is looking at the possibility of legalizing all drugs in order to remove the power of the drug cartels. And it's an idea that can, in theory, work. When we went through prohibition in this country, alcohol went from being worth pennies, per gallon, to dollars per bottle. And the wealth was so great, the gangsters literally were able to warp the government to their own way, put their own people into power. It was a time of incredible corruption, second only to the drug corruption we're seeing our government in right now. And when the corruption got bad enough where the American people said enough, Congress repealed prohibition, and the gangsters basically lost their income source. Of course, some of them had been very wise and prudent, and they'd gone legit. But it is one way of dealing with it. And there are other countries on earth that have legalized or seriously decriminalized recreational drugs and even made them available in the pharmacies. And it's made the problems associated with the cartels simply go away. So apparently, the Mexican president-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has given his future interior minister, Olga Sánchez Cordero, carte blanche to look at the possibility of legalizing drugs in a bid to curb violent crime. It's also probably going to rejuvenate the tourism traffic as well. Now, of course, the downside is that the cartels in Mexico are so powerful and so violent, this could lead to both of them being assassinated, because the drug cartels do not want to give up that money. They want the drugs to remain illegal. That's why drugs will never be legalized in this country. There's too many people inside our own government, including the CIA, who are making huge amounts of profits off the illegal drugs. They don't want that to go away. Anyway, a lot of people are still talking about this speech that Obama gave down in Johannesburg, where it covered a lot of the liberal points about, anti-male and so forth. And then he went after trashing the rich which is a very popular theme down there right now, saying there's only so big a house you can have, which is kind of odd coming from a guy who just bought an $8 million mansion in Washington, D.C. Out in California, the California Supreme Court has blocked the measure proposing to divide the state in three from appearing on the November ballot. And this is not entirely unexpected. I'm sure that Sacramento wasn't looking forward to losing 2/3 of their domain, but that's the current status on that. Meanwhile, a lot of people are still very upset over this MGM lawsuit against the shooting victims from the Mandalay Bay shooting. And what MGM is trying to do is head off a multitude of lawsuits they're going to have to defend against at huge legal expense by having one single lawsuit against the victims where the court says MGM is not liable. And MGM's claim of not being liable is based on compliance with rules and regulations regarding preparation for terrorist activity, which MGM was in compliance with, and because of the provisions in this 9/11 Safety Act, basically indemnifies companies who are in compliance. So once again, the big rich companies are free from lawsuit even when they mess up or take part in somebody else's atrocity. Now, Sacha Baron Cohen basically ran into a little bit of a snag. He was over in Riverside trying to set up another one of his bogus documentaries, and he walked in with a film crew saying that they were making a film about a Hungarian immigrant wanting to buy a gun. And the Hungarian immigrant was, of course, Sacha Baron Cohen in disguise. And the gun owner immediately got suspicious. The costume was just a little too over the top. Finally recognized it was Sacha Baron Cohen. Cohen simply left his camera crew behind. So there's camaraderie there for you. So it's tabloid TV is really what it is. It's tabloid TV. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phones here to Daniel in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Aloha, Michael. Yeah, I've been following this thing that happened in Gaza. I was a really curious story about something called, they tried to call them terror balloons.
Yes.
And at the end of Ramadan, which was June 14th, I believe, there was this claim in the Jerusalem Post that there was a compound that was producing 5,000 of them. And then they said they had an airstrike to get rid of it. And that's kind of, this group got an actor. And what about it? I was going to mention it on the air. But late this last week, Israel started rehashing the story to say that there's this compound again with 5,000 terror balloons. And it just seems like they didn't get enough traction the first time, so they're kind of using it as an excuse because it's like a David versus Goliath.
Yeah, it very much is. It very much is. And of course, if you look at how Israel has treated Gaza for years and years, and they keep, cutting them off, cutting off supplies, and then they just started shooting these protesters. And so the protesters, some of them wanted to fight back, and some of them threw rocks, and some of them flew kites, and some of them flew balloons. But it is very much a David versus Goliath situation. And for Israel to try and once again claim they are the victims of Palestinian terror. Oh my goodness, they've got a balloon, they've got a balloon, they've got a kite, run, it's the end of the world. I mean, it really is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the optics following on top of the Bloody Monday massacre itself show that Israel is completely unrepentant about what they have done.
Exactly. Yeah, the last time I flew a kite, like the story first said that they were using this incendiary kites and balloons to satellite wheat field in Israel. And I just don't get this vision of flowing fields of wheat in Israel. But 40 kilometers is how far they had to go. And the last time I flew a kite, the string wasn't anywhere near that long. And as far as helium balloons go, like, I know for a fact some of these Gaza flotillas have been trying to get toys to Gaza children, because they're only allowed 81 items into that country ever since Operation Cast Lead.
Yeah.
So I don't know where their 5,000 balloons are coming from. They say they stole the helium from a hospital. I mean, the story just didn't add up.
They're just making it up. They're making it up because they're trying to regain their victim status. It's not going to work. Nobody is going to see, the Palestinians with a couple of helium balloons and kites as somehow being an existential threat to the world's sixth most powerful military, which includes nuclear weapons. It's just not going to work. And Israel has gotten too used to being able to sell these ridiculous ideas through the corporate media. The problem is that in this country, and pretty much around the world as well, people are tuning off the corporate media because after a while, the lies have just gotten too absurd. The other caller said it. After a while, propaganda burns itself out. People pick up on the fact they're being lied to, and they just tune on out. They're not interested anymore.
Yeah, add that to the fact they just blew up 3 water wells. I mean, that sounds like a war crime to me.
Yeah, it is a war crime. That was up in Hebron.
Also, the skirmishes along in the Golan. There were some civilians that were fleeing onto the Israeli side, I believe, and they were just told to go back, which I think is another war crime. I'm not sure. Not that Israel adheres to any conventions.
No, Israel sees themselves as above all the laws here. But the hypocrisy, of course, is that Israel has, been at the forefront of insisting that war refugees be allowed into Europe and the United States. And then when some war refugees show up on their border, different set of rules. Different set of rules. And
exactly. Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't know, like if... No, I just wanted to, that whole, that's it. Just did. I think you're...
Okay, your phone is breaking up here, so we're going to let you go and switch to Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha, Michael. I thought I might give you a couple of on-scene comments about the MGM story. And it occurs to me that since the individual that was the supposed security guard was hired specifically by the CEO of MGM Mandalay Bay, and it was part of Israeli Secret Intelligence Services, and has since vaporated from the scene at a high rate, post a Helen DeGenerate appearance, apparently. And the whole story was pretty much full of hooey. Stephen Paddock was probably dead before the shooting even started. Mm-hmm. The complicity of the Clark County Sheriff, Joe Lombardo, under the guise of, I think his name was Jason Ruse, I could be wrong on the first name, the special operations FBI agent brought in just prior to this event from D.C. Quantico. The whole thing stinks to high heaven. And this lawfare suit, illegal warfare by law of legal cases being brought against the victims of the crime, seems to be an outrageous and egregious miscarriage of justice and misplaced. And I hope that the people will rise up and show their appall with this evil construct of suing the victims of the crime before the case has even been brought by the victims.
Yeah, it is outrageous, and a lot of people are very angry about that. And what we can all do, of course, now, I don't go to Las Vegas. I don't even remember the last time I was there. It's been years and years and years. Probably because I got burned out on it when I was working as a magician. I went out to Vegas all the time. But if you are a regular traveler to Las Vegas, and it is a very popular destination for vacationers from here in Hawaii, just don't go to any of the MGM properties. Don't go to the MGM Grand, don't go to the Mandalay Bay, and just stop gambling in their establishments.
Well, and let's don't forget that Nathan Adelson, his Sands properties in Paris, had a large put bet that he sold off a lot of stock just prior to it happening, about a month, and reached an egregious unjust enrichment reward whenever the stock plummeted. He was able to buy it back for a veritable cents on the dollar comparatively to what he sold it for.
Now that I had not heard.
Oh, yes. Lastly, on the balloon story in Israel, it seems to me that that's a whole lot of ballooning. So thank you very much, Michael.
All right, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. And the phone lines are now open here. Getting into the world of political correctness here, story coming on out from campusforum.org. A University of Texas Austin student has been forced to watch a movie about toxic masculinity after a Title VIII investigation found him guilty of harassment based on a non-criminal standard of evidence. In other words, it was an accusation. And according to an internal letter following an appeal of his sanctions, the student received a note from the University of Texas President Gregory Fenves saying, "Nothing you allege, even if true, would change the ultimate outcome of this matter." Well, there's a liberal for you. Facts be gosh darned. Doesn't matter if what you're saying is true. You're not allowed to say it. You watched that movie about toxic masculinity here. As you know, there is a lot of data out there on us all. One issue that doesn't get talked about is how much of that data may be erroneous. And we had an example of that happen to us where we were getting these robocalls from a collection agency, and finally Claire was able to connect with a real-life human being, only to find out that they were after somebody completely different. They just had the wrong phone number in their database. So there's a great deal of recklessness. The database, as much as it is, as great as it is, as large as it is, it's unreliable. And that gets us to our next story where it could be a problem. This is coming from ProPublica.org, saying that health insurers are vacuuming up all the details they can find about you, and they could use it to raise your rates. And there's no public scrutiny about any of this. But insurers and data brokers are predicting your health costs based on data about things like your race, your marital status, how much TV you watch, whether you pay your bills on time, or even buy plus-size clothing. Another good reason to pay cash for everything. Now, this is a tragic story, and I've actually talked about this several times with Jim Goddard on his show. And it is becoming a major problem where Canadians bringing money into the United States are getting it confiscated. So there was this Ottawa man, David Sikely, was acting as executor of a will, and he said that TD Canada Trust gave him advice to mail $500,000 in bank drafts to family members in the U.S., beneficiaries of the will. And border officials noticed it and seized the money, and it's been there for an entire year. And David is now saying he's starting to think the family members will never see their inheritance. It's like the money fell into a black hole. And he said he was in a rush to get the money because one beneficiary's health is deteriorating, and he's got a huge pile of medical bills. And a lot of Canadians are aware of this kind of treatment, and as a result, they're not coming to this country unless they have to. They're afraid to come into this country, and the stuff is just going to be taken from them. So, little article coming on out from townhall.com about and I was talking about this before, how entertainment shows are vehicles for propaganda. And in the context of this article, it's gun control propaganda. Now, when I was a kid, we had Roy Rogers, and we had Western shows, and, you know, Bang Bang, and the good guys would always shoot the bad guys and so forth. And we know that up until very recently, guns played a large role in a lot of TV shows. But have you noticed ever since MacGyver in the 1980s, less and less of these shows are using guns. In fact, more and more are expressing an aversion to them. And apparently they're getting to remake MacGyver because nobody in Hollywood can come up with an original idea. And he's going to have the aversion to guns. And apparently this spring on ABC's The Crossing, the sheriff's young son says, "I don't like guns," when a deputy suggests he may someday replace his father. So they're pushing the anti-gun propaganda in Hollywood. And, you know, that may be another reason why people aren't watching all that much. And, boy, there was that, the sequel to Mamma Mia. Boy, did that bomb at the box office. Oh, my goodness here. By the way, the movie I was trying to remember the other day, it was called Shock and Awe, about how the Knight Ridder newspaper basically blew the whistle on the fact that we went to war in Iraq on the basis of a lie of weapons of mass destruction. Now, the film is being dissed by the corporate media, obviously, and they're saying it's a disaster, don't go to see it. But I watched it. Claire and I watched it. It's a good movie, and it tells a good story, and it's got a stellar cast. So it's on cable, it's on pay-per-view, it's called Shock and Awe. It is well worth taking a look at. Now, getting on over to Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, boy, talk about arrogance. And responding to the furious backlash, the public backlash about censorship, Mark Zuckerberg is saying, well, yeah, InfoWars can stay on Facebook, but its content will be censored and shadow banned. So we're still in control. You know, Mark Zuckerberg is starting to remind me of the control voice in the old TV series, The Outer Limits. We will control all that you see and hear. It's exactly what he sounds like right now. So he's now backtracking on his pledge that the social network will not ban those who question the official story of the Holocaust. And again, they want to take away freedom of speech for us ordinary people. They want freedom of speech for the corporate media and for themselves, obviously. They don't want us talking to each other. They don't want us being able to communicate on a massive level with each other. They're trying to figure out a way to shut that down without getting one of those pesky First Amendment lawsuits here. Now, a lot of people have been saying because of Facebook's arrogance and abuse of its near monopoly position that it's time to break up Facebook the way the Bell telephone company was broken up way ago. And Zuckerberg is out there trying, obviously, to fend that off, saying the breakup of Facebook will lead to Chinese tech dominance. Now, I'm not sure where he's getting that from. I mean, the Chinese are doing really great things with technology. That fast telescope that they've built, it's just absolutely amazing. Zuckerberg is just saying this. He doesn't want to lose his monopoly. But I'm in agreement with those who think these should all be broken up. We need to bring back competition to the field of social media. Because all these big shots, Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, they're all starting to act as gatekeepers for corporate agendas, for the U.S. government agenda, for the war agenda, for Israel's agenda. That makes them really useless for ordinary people to have a discussion on. The only thing they're valuable for is posting pictures about your latest adventure at the beach or funny kitten videos or something like that. Now, getting on back to China, China is making great inroads on artificial intelligence. As we reported earlier in the week, they've actually come up with an AI that can diagnose brain tumors. And it is already faster and more accurate than the human doctors. So there's a question. Who and what will artificial intelligence serve? And China is saying the needs of the public and the economy, and the U.S. is saying militarize it, turn it into a weapon. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And somebody just posted an interesting article at whatreallyhappened.com. Apparently, YouTube, when you go on in and you do a news-related search, what will come up at the very top are the corporate media channels like CNN, MSNBC, and so forth. And the independent media channels, which is why people were going to YouTube in the first place, are way down at the bottom if they show up at all. So I'm working on getting a new account set up at real.video. Maybe I'll get to that this weekend in my copious amounts of free time. So another story here, as you know, we all love our smartphones here, but it turns out some are unfortunately prone to failure. And so looking at this article coming out of techrepublic.com, they're naming the worst phones, meaning the least reliable for both the Android and the iPhone. And the top failing Android device models are, I don't know how to pronounce it, Xiaomi, Redmi, Motorola Moto G 5S, the Lenovo K8 Note, HMD Global Nokia 6, Samsung Galaxy S7. Now, over in the iPhones, the least reliable models are the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6S, the iPhone 6S Plus, the iPhone 7 Plus, and the iPhone 6 Plus. So that's where they are. A lot of people are starting to say that people can actually have allergic reactions to some of the materials being used in the construction of those phones. So we're going to have to look at that. Now, over at Instagram, just to show you how this is going on, there was a meme put up that basically said it was an attack at Planned Parenthood, saying that Planned Parenthood killed more black lives in the last 2 weeks than were killed by an entire century of the Ku Klux Klan, which is factually correct, and Instagram took it down. They're feeling their agenda fall apart. They don't want challenges to abortion and Planned Parenthood. They're in a panic here. Apparently, there's a new bit of skullduggery going out on the net. Apparently, hackers are breaking into, or have broken into, a Canadian healthcare provider and stolen patient and employee records, including medical histories, and are basically now contacting the patients to say that unless they are paid, they will leak their very sensitive medical circumstances, their conditions online, which for people who are dealing with an STD or something, that could be a problem. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who, as always, joins us on hour number 3 of our Fridays. And what's the first thing you want to talk about today?
Well, the first thing I wanted to talk about and add a little to, I know that you mentioned it toward the beginning of the show, this whole situation with Maxine Waters. And all I could think, she was, as most of you know, terrified that the Oath Keepers were going to come to her office and do something violent. Well, they never showed up. And the supporters set fire to the American flag, and some LA residents joined activist groups as well as union, church leaders, and more for the midday demonstrations. Now, as Mike said, the burning of the flag is constitutionally protected under a Supreme Court ruling. But I hope that you get a chance to look at these images and think about it. You know, I have to wonder, Mike, which of these people who legitimately came to protest believed for 1 second that their lives were going to be changed by it or made better. Can you explain this to me after she's been in power almost 40 years? And if you live in LA and you know where Compton is, the area she represents is very rough.
It's not doing well at all, which begs the question of just how is it she gets reelected all this time? I mean, Compton is so rough. She does own a residence there, an address, because technically you have to have an address in the district you represent.
Oh, but she lives in Hancock Park, which, again, if you know LA, is one of the more Tony and in some areas gated and guarded part
I think
of the
her
forest.
house is something like a $4 million house, so she's doing really well, while her constituents are not doing well at all. But yeah, this rabble-rousing, if you will, strikes me as very dangerous. And maybe the goal is to try and actually create rioting all across America where somebody gets to declare a national emergency and complete the transition. Let's see. Okay, I'm being asked to move your mic back just a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
There we
All
are.
right, okay. All right. And did some of these demonstrators come from one of those rent-a-mob companies? And Craigslist had an ad, 15 an hour to protest at the Trump rally. So we know these organizations exist.
I wonder if this is what they're using to say we've got low unemployment. There's all these people who get to work for one day, you know, for this thing.
And in looking, and I say this not in any derogatory way to the protesters who were sincerely there and don't feel that their lives are doing well, were any of these demonstrators chided by their employers for being late coming back from lunch because they participated in the demonstration?
Well, I would imagine probably a lot of them are actually on food stamps and welfare. And, you know, Compton's not a lot of jobs in Compton, you know, unless you're a motorcycle mechanic. Probably.
Some very interesting things about Waters' background. She was charged by the Senate Ethics Committee on 3 counts, and as Mike just mentioned, Compton is so crime and gang filled, she won't even live there, you know. And I'm very glad that the Oath Keepers did not show up, because they didn't want to risk a violent confrontation, thought better of it, and stayed away. You know, and I would very much, something I did yesterday that I want to share with our readers and listeners. In commenting on this potential for this Oath Keepers demonstration that never happened, I did something rather momentous for me. I have invited Maxine Waters to our home for tea. You heard me correctly. The next time she is on Oahu. Now, I wouldn't place bets.
I had nothing to do with this.
I wouldn't place bets that she's going to show up. But I said, could we possibly talk and reason together, you know, in a reasonable kind of way, and talk about it and see if we can find some areas where she and I might agree. You know, we are both sister Christians, I believe, and I'd like to hope that and some civility would count for something, you know. And, but I don't know.
Are you trying to get back up to the top?
Yes, I'm trying to get back up to the top. Thank you. Okay. And he has a wonderful shortcut.
Yes,
okay.
let me just get this
All
for you.
right, okay. But yes, Maxine Waters.
Too many buttons.
Yes. Come to tea at our place, at the Rivero home.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we are. We're all set.
I'd like to focus now on the insanity that's been this last week relative to President Trump and Putin.
Yes.
And there was an article recently that for more than a decade, out of New York Slimes, for more than a decade, Russia has meddled in elections around the world, supported brutal dictators, and invaded sovereign nations, all to the detriment of United States interests, and I think we have a shout-out.
Well, yeah, we just have a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. And I see you've already made the connection up here to displacement projection syndrome, because everything that is in that quote from the New York Slimes is what the U.S. has been doing.
hello.
The U.S. has been meddling in elections all over the world. The U.S. is invading sovereign nations, and the U.S. supported brutal dictators like the Shah of Iran, Pinochet, early on, Saddam Hussein. So, I mean, it's ridiculous for the New York Times to come on out with this and not understand. Americans will look at that and just laugh silly, saying, they're talking about us.
Yeah, exactly. And there was another article that comes to us from globalresearch.ca. It's a Canadian outlet, and I encourage people to take a look at it. They have some very well-written and sober commentaries on the current state of geopolitics. And the article is titled, "Donald Trump was elected by Russia? Mass dementia in the Western establishment." You know, and it is a form of mental illness. And my response to this is that the liberal press and the liberals' response to the Helsinki summit would be hysterically funny were it not for the serious accusations that have been raised against President Trump to the point of labeling him a traitor for wanting to pursue a pathway toward building a better relationship with Russia rather than a pathway to war.
And I have a comment about that because remember, shortly before he was assassinated, there were posters being put up all around Dallas, Texas, with John F. Kennedy's picture on there, basically calling him a traitor to the United States for refusing to confront the Soviet Union. So
and
it is getting very scary how many parallels there are right now.
And to me, and from my perspective, Mike, the real traitors to this country are those aligned with the military-industrial complex who are doing everything in their power to convince my brother and sister Americans to perceive war as the only way for the U.S. government to achieve the geopolitical outcomes it wants, when there are other ways, innumerable other ways, to accomplish the U.S. government's goal.
Well, you have to look at what are the real goals here. The major goal is to drag the world economy back under the hegemonic domination of the U.S. dollar. They want to go back to Bretton Woods. Another agenda clearly is because the U.S. is in decline, they want to make sure that Russia and China decline further and faster so that we can still say we're the greatest nation on earth even as we descend into squalor. The armaments industry wants to make more money. And of course, you've got Israel who wants Iran broken up and balkanized.
And there is another piece, again, from a source that I like to link to. It's called Zero Hedge. And the title of the article is "The New Handmaids of the Warfare State, Democrats and the Liberal Media." And it talks about the spending for the military industrial complex and the fact that the spending is going to ultimately cause a fiscal breakdown. There's no way to get around it, Mike. As it escalates and escalates.
We're spending money on stuff which hopefully will never be used. But if it's used, most of it is used only once. And the money is just pouring into this gigantic maw over at the Pentagon.
This sinkhole.
And nothing that really benefits our nation, other than the money junkies over at the weapons factories, is coming back out. And it's mostly borrowed money because it's no coincidence that the size of the U.S. budget deficit is roughly the same size as the Defense Department budget, the military security budget.
And I have something I want to share with our audience, because I watched while the press conference was being held on Monday in Helsinki. And when I saw President Trump in that press conference with President Putin, and they were talking about potentials that could happen for peace, and peace won on the basis of hard-won moral negotiations, President Trump, with whose administration I have a hug and a very gentle, not hurting punch relationship, was speaking for and to me. Claire Rivero, composer, church music lady, me. I was very impressed by the sanity that I saw breaking out. And I've got to tell you, Mike, I would believe that most sane Americans want peace achieved through intelligent negotiations rather than war. And a guy who hit it on the head from Daily Mail, Piers Morgan, with whom I agree sometimes and with whom I absolutely do not agree others, had a wonderful op-ed, and it said, whisper it, but despite his terrible week, Trump may be absolutely right to pursue this new bromance with Putin.
Good.
And I think he said what needed to be said. And there are, President Putin is no saint. We know this, okay?
Well, we don't really know. We've never met him.
No, but, probably not a saint. But I think the fact that these two gentlemen are starting to talk may herald some possibilities we didn't have before.
Yeah,
and
but look how many people are trying to prevent that second meeting.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer's out there. Leon Panetta's out there. I mean,
Dan Coates, who chuckled with incredulity when the news was broken to him during a live interview by Andrea Mitchell.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be sparking outrage. What I'd like to hope is that it's sparking some hope that maybe the numbers of wars and the reasons for wars, or justifications, if you will, are going to start to diminish because President Trump, love him or hate him, did something that required, let's say, male attributes of titanium that click. It did require that to even do this. And I hope that the tenor and what I'm feeling is this rising fury it's like from a misdirected magic trick,
It is.
Yeah.
And, see, the military-industrial complex and its allies in Congress, like, John McCain, they have been trying to rebuild the Cold War for years now.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the original Cold War collapsed with it, the American people said, oh, wow, well, now we can take some of this money we've been spending on the military and we can spend it on our schools and roads and hospitals and things like that. And the military-industrial complex said, we can't allow that to happen. So we need a war. We need more wars here. We need another enemy here.
Yeah.
And so for the last few years now, Russia went from being a friend and a partner, member of the G8, everybody's doing business with it, good buddy, and all of a sudden the demonization began. Russia's doing this, Russia's doing that. Vladimir Putin passes gas in elevators,
right,
and whatever else they can think about it. Because they need an enemy to be able to go on scaring us out of our money and the lives of our children.
It's a very Israeli tactic, by the way.
Well, but for those of us who lived through the first Cold War, we realize it's all a giant bluff.
Yeah.
I grew up in an age where we were constantly being warned that the Soviets were going to nuke us, they were going to invade our shores, they were going to force socialized medicine on us, and all this other stuff. It never happened.
No.
The only time we actually got close to a real conflict with the Soviet Union was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the U.S. provoked that by putting those Pershing nuclear-tipped missiles into Turkey.
Yeah, yeah. And, for all you may think of him or want to say about him, let's give the guy a little bit of credit on both this as opening up dialogue. The same with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I'm hoping that is going to bear fruit. But I think that we really need to give this guy a little credit for doing what a lot of other American presidents didn't seem to be able to do. He's opening some doors.
Well, that's definitely a good thing, but I hope his security is on their tiptoes because Trump just made a lot of enemies. And again, the parallels to what went down with Kennedy cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, pretty frightening.
It is very, very frightening.
And apparently with Donald Trump, he's going to be inviting Putin to Washington this fall. And I think that's another good move.
I would agree with you on that, but again, just like they tried to sabotage the first summit between them, the powers that be, the war party, they're already out there saying, no, this can't happen, this can't happen. And especially trying to pry into what Putin and Trump talked about in that closed-door meeting,
And
they're basically violating the separation of powers doctrine.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got Leon Panetta saying, we have a right to know what was going on in there.
Yeah.
And Schumer is saying, no more meetings until we know what was in there. Now, fortunately, Congress voted down the bill to force the translator who had been in the room to testify under oath. So it's a little bit of good news on that one.
Yeah, and the other ironic thing is Putin doesn't need a translator. His
he
English
speaks
is
excellent
absolutely brilliant. And I have to say, and there are some things, as I've said, I'm not happy about the Trump administration with, but this is one where I am, because in my world, I will take honest negotiations over war anytime, Mike.
Well, I would as well, but the problem is you've got all those people who make money off of war. Again, I'm sure that we have right now a lot of members of Congress who, because of 17 years of ongoing war, their stock portfolios are loaded up with all these defense stocks. Yeah. And if all of a sudden peace breaks out, they're going to lose all that money and they're going to be very unhappy. They'll cry.
Yes,
they will cry.
I know.
And so, yeah.
Turning over domestically here, there has been yet another road rage incident on the part of a police officer in Indianapolis who beat an innocent cancer patient for telling him to slow down.
Now, it was the cancer patient who told the cop to slow down because there's apparently a speeding problem on that street, and it was an undercover cop in an unmarked car.
Yes.
So the cancer patient didn't realize it was a cop, but the cop was doing about 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
We actually have the same problem on the road outside of our house. It's posted for 25. Everybody comes roaring down that hill.
Well, we've got drag racers.
Yeah, there are drag bike races out there early in the morning.
Yeah.
And so this cancer patient was just calling to the cop, saying, slow down, and the cop just beats him up.
Yeah. Now, I have one gentleman I need to call out on this. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, white courtesy telephone, please. I would like this man to start telling the truth when he goes out to police officers association affairs, etc. The statistics bear out that there is no real war on the cops, but there are wars against Americans by our police officers.
They're clearly out of control. Very few cops ever get punished for doing this sort of behavior.
Yeah.
We know that a lot of them are on these prescription antidepressants, which can, get in the way of impulse control.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll just pop into their head, I'm going to beat up this guy for telling me I shouldn't be speeding, even though I'm speeding.
Yeah.
And they just go with it.
Yeah, it's, well, you've told the stories that many times someone had poor impulse control and was going to do something awful and they got stopped and they get asked, why were you going to do this? And they have no idea.
No, they don't. We got to take a break for commercials and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we turn back here to the Lady Claire, Fox News has just confirmed something I reported earlier in the program. We're talking about the friction along the border with Gaza, that yes, an IDF soldier was in fact shot and killed by a Hamas sniper. And I imagine that must have come as a bit of a shock for all these Israeli snipers who've just been firing into these crowds with impunity all these weeks. And all of a sudden there's bullets coming back at them and be a look of shock on their face. Saying, they're shooting back. Are they allowed to do that?
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
I've got some more that I want to share with you on Israel a little later.
All right, fine.
But right now, and this comes to us from Blacklisted News, again, a site that I would recommend. While the rich are enjoying yachts that have tiny yachts inside them, an estimated 400,000 people in the U.S. are suffering under modern slavery. And apparently there's a new Gilded Age going on for the very rich. And this is a very interesting study. And it's according to the 2018 Global Slavery Index, published annually by the Walk Free Foundation. There are 40 million people worldwide living under such conditions, including 1 in 800 Americans. Let that number sink in a second. 1 in 800 Americans.
Okay, now are they including the prison population?
No.
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 Okay.
No. This is a really staggering statistic. And you have to think of places and areas where you've got, let's say, big tobacco,
Yep.
and the situations in which the people who are not legally documented are working. And yeah, I can see why that could be company store, slave type, poverty conditions. Yeah, it happens. And we also cannot forget how the U.S. citizens' love of cheap consumer products fuels these conditions in the countries that make them.
Well, I have to speak here in defense of the U.S. consumer.
Okay.
I would prefer to go into a store and buy a high-quality product that I don't have to replace 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Even if it's more expensive and made here in America.
Mm-hmm.
It is these importers, the owners of the big box stores, who have arbitrarily decided we are not going to carry the high-quality merchandise.
Okay.
We're going to import the really inexpensive merchandise so that our profits go up, and so it will wear out in 6 months, and our customers have to buy the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not really the U.S. consumers. I think most people understand if you buy quality, you only have to buy it maybe once.
Yeah.
If you buy
I agree with
the
that
cheap
point.
thing, you're going to be replacing it every 6 months.
Yeah. Want to go over to touch on a story that is breaking. Apparently, more evidence has been uncovered and shows that Obama was spying on Trump illegally as early as 2015. Apparently, in early June, the U.S. Senate released over 500 pages of information related to the Spygate scandal. Hidden in the information were unredacted Strzok page texts that show that the FBI initiated actions to insert multiple spies in the Trump campaign in December of 2015.
And they weren't just spies.
Yeah.
Some of them were agent provocateurs that were trying to entrap and compromise Trump campaign officials.
Yeah. And I am completely unsurprised at this development because President Obama has an industrial strength penchant for sneaky, as evidenced by his throwing more U.S. servicemen into the civil war in Yemen under his watch at the behest of the Saudi royal family and government, and with barely a yawn from the alleged U.S. press about it. And to this day, the U.S. prostitutes will not use the words war crimes to discuss the U.S. military's enabling of Saudi forces here, Mike.
Okay, and I want to put out a little clarification. Okay, it's not a civil war in Yemen any more than it was a civil war over in Syria. It was an attempted overthrow of the government and replacement of the government, and there was a successful intervention in Yemen some years ago. And then the people of Yemen decided they didn't want to live under foreign puppet rule, so they kicked out the puppet rulers.
Right.
Much as the way the Iranians did in 1979.
Right.
Well, the U.S. can't have these provinces breaking free, and that's when they got together with the Saudis to go on in and we're going to just slap those Yemenis around until they learn to love their foreign puppet rulers. And that's what this is really all about.
Yeah.
It's not a civil war. It is an outside intervention attempting to basically bring the country under, we call it covert colonialism. I mean, the days when one country would invade another country and hoist their flag over the land, those are definitely gone.
Yeah.
But the idea of going on in and seizing control of the other country, that's still alive and well. And that's what is going on right now. And they create the illusion of a democracy and a free government, but it's really subservient to the United States.
Yeah.
And that's that's the new term of craft, covert colonialism.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, we got to take another break here for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, take it away.
Okay. Michael touched on this a little bit earlier today, but I'd like to add some information. And I also have some questions for you on this. Apparently, Syria's Assad is set to recover Golan Frontier as surrender deal agreed. Now, this is not sourced, which makes it a little bit of icky-sticky, but, you know, it would be nice to hope that this is going to happen.
Well, actually, it was just on Fox News.
Okay.
the militants down along that Golan border have surrendered. Syria is now back in control.
Okay.
And hopefully, if everybody just settles down and stays calm, that will be the end of it there.
But the questions I have, because as we know, Israel is now occupying the Golan and selling the oil and natural gas underneath, right? The question is here, to what lengths will Russia and al-Assad go to recover the Golan from Israel? And what lengths will Israel go to keep it? And the other question, Mike, I'd like you to answer is, what can we do to keep the U.S. from getting caught up in this fight, which could well turn into a hot war against Russia in Syria over the Golan? How do we keep that from happening?
Well, I think Assad would be well advised to just write off the Golan, because on that path lies madness. It would result in a war between Israel and Syria, and Syria's already they've been at war for 7 years, and they need to rebuild. What lengths would Russia do? I think Putin would sit this one out. He doesn't want to have any part of it because of the possibility that the United States would come in on Israel's side and we get into a direct confrontation. I would say probably, who knows? The proper thing would be for Syria to go to the United Nations, but as long as the U.S. ambassador to the Security Council uses the veto, the UN really can't do anything about it.
And Nikki Haley will. Yeah, absolutely.
No, nobody gets to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations without absolutely pledging to veto any motions critical of Israel. That's in the job description. Make coffee, copy things, veto anti-Israel resolution.
Okay, I don't think it's quite that simplistic.
Oh, okay.
The Pentagon is stating that U.S.-backed militias in Syria are holding 600 foreign fighters in custody. And it's like, what are they going to do with them? And apparently they're in SDF custody, and there doesn't seem to be a plan to repatriate these guys.
When they say foreign fighters, where are they from?
They're from 40 are from Russia, with about a dozen from Germany and France, respectively. And there has been, there are real questions. And SecDef Mattis has said that the countries of origin need to take responsibility for them. And I would say, respectfully, SecDef Mattis, no. The countries of origin did not encourage these men to fight the duly elected Syrian government and the militaries. The U.S. did that. And so if political resolutions between these militia and the Syrian government can be facilitated, so much the better. I would like to hope that the militias who were armed and trained and funded by the U.S. and the Syrian government are going to start a real dialogue and get these guys home.
Well, the problem I have is that I am certain, pardon me, I'm certain there are still people in the military-industrial complex inside the deep state who are still trying to figure out some way they can turn this around and go back against Assad. Either a new false flag chemical weapon attack. I noticed that they're evacuating the white helmets. They get to go home and retire on, I'm sure, what will be a very nice, healthy stipend for their services rendered. But we're not out of this until we're really out of it. And the big issue, of course, is we have SecDef Mattis saying that the United States must stay in Syria to prevent the reemergence of ISIS. And again, the issue here is that Syria has invited Russia to be there. Russia's done a very, very good job of cleaning out the U.S.-backed terrorists. The United States legally does not have any basis to be in Syria. There's no UN Security Council resolution authorizing it. There's been no declaration of war by the Congress. It's just the executive branch saying, I feel like going into Syria today because, there's nothing good on TV. Let's invade Syria.
There was something else that came to us from, What Does It Mean? And it's an opinion. One FBI text in Russia probe that should alarm every American. And they're characterizing Lisa Page and Peter Strzok as the don't text and investigate public service ads airing soon at an FBI office near you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's given the FBI a black eye, laying bare a raw political bias being brought into the workplace that agents are supposed to check at the door when they strap on their guns and badges. And it's no secret anymore that they openly discussed using the powers of their office to stop Trump from becoming president. The only question is whether any official acts they took in the Russian collusion probe were driven by those sentiments. And I mean, come on.
That's going to be kind of hard to establish that causality in a court of law. Did you pick up on the story I mentioned earlier that Peter Strzok's wife is in charge of the investigation of the Clinton Foundation, which is why it's gone absolutely nowhere. They're all dirty. They're all dirty. These people are all just slimy, corrupt monsters.
Turning my attention again toward Israel and Gaza, there was an article from Global Research. Gaza patients appeal to the world to save their lives. And they organized, these hospital patients, a sit-in in central Gaza City to appeal to the international community, Quds Press quoted Tuesday. And the sit-ins included patients who were wounded by Israel as well as rights groups. It took place in front of the Eretz crossing where Gazans can pass through to receive treatment in Israel or Palestinian hospitals in the West Bank.
Except that crossing is now closed.
Speakers at the sit-in said that Gaza's hospitals suffer from horrendous shortages in medicine, lab equipment, testing materials due to the PA sanctions and Israel's siege of the Strip. The patients called for the international community to save their lives by lifting the siege and the sanctions. Spokesperson for the Ministry of Health in Gaza, Ashraf Al-Qidra, called for immediate and unconditional end to the suffering of Gaza patients. And Mike, Israelis should be ashamed that Gaza patients have to do this in order to get attention to the appalling conditions of Gaza's hospital.
Well, the problem is Israel has no shame.
No, they have collectively had it surgically removed.
They have shown themselves to be completely unrepentant.
Yeah.
They're still out there trying to act like they're the victims of these terror kites and terror balloons, and that it's perfectly justified for Israel to be shooting all of these protesters, unarmed protesters, with these expanding butterfly bullets. Nobody's buying it, though. I think the Bloody Monday massacre was a turning point.
I would like to hope that you were correct on that. And here was another article that appeared in antiwar.com, another site that I commend to all of our readers and listeners. Israel declares itself an apartheid state, and governments must hold it accountable, by Omar Baghdouti. There was a statement released today by the Palestinian Boycott National Committee. Israel effectively declares itself an apartheid state. Palestinian civil society reacts to Israel's Jewish non-state law.
No, nation-state
law. Thank you. Today, they gave the final approval to the basic law, Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people, that unambiguously defines Israel as a state that belongs exclusively to the Jewish people. Now, Mike, this is despite the fact that 1 in 5 citizens of Israel is an indigenous, non-Jewish Palestinian.
Well, this is setting the stage for basically the final confiscation of Gaza and the West Bank and the forced deportation of the remaining Palestinians.
Yeah. And Adalah, which is a leading Palestinian human rights organization in Israel, describes how the law affirms the principle of apartheid in housing, land, and citizenship. It concludes by saying that this law constitutionally sanctions institutionalized discrimination. And Najwan Berekta, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, reacted, "This is why the world, both individuals and governments, need to move forward with the BDS movement just as quickly as possible. Economics is a language the Israeli people and government understand very clearly." And I would say that that is absolutely correct.
Yeah, and that's why Israel is trying to get their subservient governments around the world, including ours, to pass laws outlawing support for the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, even though boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent, peaceful protest protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But then Israel hates that First Amendment.
Oh,
they want that one to go away.
Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely. I'd like to hop over to Iraq for a moment. And cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, remember this guy?
Yep.
All right. He was the gentleman who made sure that the Americans got out of Iraq the first time, exactly to the time and date of the SOFA agreement there. Well, apparently right now he is backing Iraqi protesters and calling for a delay in government formation. And his political bloc won Iraq's May 12th election, and he called on all politicians to delay efforts to form a new government until the demands of protesters seeking better services in the South are met. And he's very with the program. He's tweeting, the winning political parties in the election have to suspend all political dialogues for forming coalitions and until they meet protesters' rightful demands, he tweeted in his first public comment.
Well, there is a problem, okay, because he's putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
They've got to come together and form the government before they can start to address the needs of the protesters. I think we're looking at possibly a bad translation where Muqtada al-Sadr basically was saying we've got to put aside the partisan bickering.
Okay.
And just get together and get the job done. That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But I'm glad that he seems to be listening to the people of Iraq, and he's trying to come up with a solution. It's a lot better than what they've had so far.
You want to back up just a little bit? There was a comment there I wanted to respond to.
Okay.
Where it said, Iraqi protesters blame bad government, bad roads, bad people.
Yes.
Well, let's not forget that Iraq was a rather beautiful country until the United States went on in and just messed everything up.
I agree. Bopping back over to Israel, Israel's defense minister says a large and painful military operation set for Gaza.
It's already underway.
Yeah.
It's underway.
Yeah. And all signs are currently pointing toward a broader outbreak of fighting. As in the new comments, the Israeli defense minister is preparing the public for, again, the quote, a large and painful military operation to come. In Israel, officials and media have referred to this latest flare-up as the biggest attack since Operation Protective Edge in 2014. And now Defense Minister Lieberman is warning that Israel is prepared to go to war if Gazans don't cease releasing incendiary kites and balloons in an attempt to set communities and farmlands in southern Israel ablaze.
Well, you know, I have this idea. I'll bet you if Israel stopped gunning down unarmed protesters, the Gazans would stop sending the balloons and the kites.
Probably. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea. But, you know, Israel seems to have this idea that they can go and just shoot anybody that they want, and if they dare shoot back, oh my goodness, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater.
What I'm getting out of this, expect an Israeli genocide of Gaza.
I think Israel's going to take Gaza back.
Yeah.
And I've made that prediction all the way back when Ariel Sharon made that deal. We're going to get out of Gaza Strip, let the Palestinians have it, as long as you let us build the illegal settlements in the West Bank. And I predicted back then, once those settlements were realities on the ground, Israel would move to take back Gaza, and I think that's about what's to happen.
Yeah, and the observation I'd share with our listeners and viewers is that while the U.S. is embroiled with faux Trumpophobic and Russiaphobic charges stemming from the Helsinki summit between Trump and Putin, Tel Aviv may think that this is possibly one of the best times for the IDF to simply bomb everything that moves in Gaza, including infants, women, and the medically fragile elderly, and figures Netanyahu can give his rationale for the genocide to Trump at a later point in time. And this has already been telegraphed.
Yes.
At the Israel Today, Israeli army told to prepare for a large-scale operation in Gaza.
Yeah, they're going to go on in.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to go on in.
How soon do you think?
Well, they're going in now.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they've sent in the warplanes. They already have the snipers along the fence. it seems like Israel can't go for more than 2.5, 3 years without pounding those people into the earth.
Yeah.
But I think this time they're just going to go for it completely and move on in, take over Gaza, execute Hamas, and everybody living in Gaza will be told to go live somewhere else.
Where can they go? Because their Arab brothers and sisters are not taking them in, Mike.
Well, you forget the Arab nations in the area have already taken in most of the displaced Palestinians from the creation of Israel. There are huge Palestinian refugee camps all over the Mideast.
Yeah, and they're full.
And they're full.
Yeah, okay.
And they're absolutely full. The people who are still in Gaza and the West Bank are the Palestinians who refuse to leave.
Yeah, yeah. Would like to bob over to China and South Korea. And there was an article, I believe, from Zero Hedge. China and South Korea will displace the West as the world's innovation leaders by 2029. And the article goes on to state that unless the U.S. takes action now to improve its innovation and commercialization processes, it's going to lose its leading positions by all measures of innovation by 2029. And the outlook is similarly gloomy for the EU and the UK. And they predicted that East Asian countries, mainly China and South Korea, are set to race past their Western counterparts in patent grant numbers, patent quality growth, and return on R&D spending, among other metrics. And this was jointly produced by the Center for Advancing Innovation, CAI, and PatSnap, the Innovation Arms Race 2018. And
well, this is what you get when your colleges are cranking out liberal snowflake art history majors instead of engineers and scientists. We have to take a commercial break here.
Okay.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And this attack on Trump, it's degenerated into a farce. Apparently, some petitioners in Washington, D.C. Have launched a petition to take away the liquor license from the Trump Hotel because he is a bad character. And I noticed earlier today Fox News was regurgitating that story about how Donald Trump may have had an affair with a Playboy playmate. And what healthy young man didn't dream of doing that growing up, be honest. And paid her off, and now they're saying there may be a recording. You know something? I don't care.
I don't either.
I really don't care.
Yeah.
And this bickering, this hysteria of trying to find something to harm Donald Trump, it's backflashing on the Democrats. They're hoisting with their own petard. Every time they continue forward with more of this politically correct nonsense or Russia or anything, their numbers go down. Their donations go down. They're burning out. They don't know when to quit, which has been a feature of liberalism pretty much all along.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's embarrassing to me as an American citizen to have the world watching how our government is behaving now. It is embarrassing.
Yeah.
It really is. Okay, so you got another story here?
Yeah, I do. This again came from Zero Hedge. Is China's day of reckoning coming? And it talks about deleveraging is policy in China now, financial policy. The shadow banking system is simply the system of financial transactions that happen outside of the banking system's oversight facility. And whenever China makes a substantive change to its monetary policy to burst another part of the shadow banking industry bubble, these bouts of deleveraging occur. And there is also a wave of bankruptcies and corporate bond defaults as well. And in this case, it's a coal mining company, Windtime Energy, who defaulted on CNY 11 billion of bonds this week.
That's a lot.
That's intense. There have been 18 such corporations doing bond defaults this year. There will likely be dozens, if not hundreds more. And this is because of the Trump-China trade war taking its toll on global trade. It's going to disrupt supply chains, which it already has. I believe Maersk filed for bankruptcy.
Yes.
And will cause sharper upward
Well,
demand.
they haven't filed for bankruptcy, but they're definitely struggling.
Yeah.
And it's because they're trying to consolidate cargo. It's actually taking things like mail longer to get from the mainland to here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Because I had somebody who mailed me 2 packages on the same day. One got here about a week ago. The other one is still somewhere out on the Pacific Ocean.
Lost in translation. And another thing that we need to be concerned about, and this came to us from RT, from a gentleman whose last name I am probably going to slaughter, but I will try.
Shatamasabi.
Darius Shatamasabi from Russia Today. And apparently, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand are deeply concerned about Chinese influence expansion throughout the Pacific region.
Well, there's our music.
Okay.
All right. Well, so they're all nervous about China. End of story. All right. This is it. End of our show for on this Pauhana Friday. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please share what we tell you with everybody that you know. Have a nice, safe weekend. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. We'll talk to you on Monday. Aloha, America.